Hi, I'm Doug Daugherty with Hamilton Flourishing, and we're so glad you've joined us for what I think is going to be a very exciting and informative interview. Um, we're going to be talking with Boyd Patterson about a law that could really have an impact, a serious impact, maybe an overwhelming impact on gang violence in Chattanooga. Now, who thinks that's a big deal? Well, Hamilton Flourishing recently did a poll conducted by professionals. We underwrote it, and it came back that people were concerned about neighborhood safety and violence was the top issue in all the issues we asked about in Hamilton County of adults. And then we dug a little deeper and we said, well, is it gang violence or other kind of violence that you're concerned about? And a clear majority came back and said, yes, it's gang violence that I'm concerned about. And then a bit added more to that. A recent grand jury report said that a small number of people who commit serious crimes in Hamilton County, there's a small number of people who commit serious crimes in Hamilton County and they're gang related. So all that paints kind of a background to this conversation. I have wondered for months, is there not something that can be done? Law enforcement can't get there and stop every bullet that's just randomly sprayed around there. That's impossible. It's just you have no idea. The solutions, in my mind, that have been offered so far, except for this, have real limited application. And so, why doesn't law enforcement have the tools it needs? Is there a tool out there that law enforcement has or could have that could really put a dent in the gang violence in Hamilton County? So today we're talking to Boyd Patterson. Boyd is the Assistant Public Defender of Hamilton County. He was a prosecutor for the state of Tennessee, a prosecutor for 15 years. So he's been both a defender and a prosecutor. He led the gang task force in Hamilton County and the city of Chattanooga in 2011 to 2013. He worked for a while at Campbell and Campbell. He had a law degree, he has a law degree from Duquesne University in 2000. He attended the University of West Virginia, where he got his MA in psychology, and our own UTC, where he got his BS in psychology. So Boyd has a real interesting background. If you think about it, wow, that's a lot of perspectives to bring to this issue. Gangs, defense, prosecution. So he's covered the waterfront, and Boyd has been actively involved. I found out as I've gotten to know him in trying to improve what are called RICO laws, or the state of Tennessee RICO law. And Boyd, really glad you could be with us today. Thank you for your time. Before we get started, tell me a little bit about yourself. Are you married?
Yes, we're going to celebrate 28 years of marriage this year, as a matter of fact, in May.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Kids?
2 kids. One is 20, one is 17, about to graduate high school. So Nancy and I are imminent empty nesters.
You can do what we did and move to a smaller home at that point. And then they don't have any place to put their stuff, so you're really doubly blessed. So Boyd, let me just start out with this question. Do local law enforcement, in your mind, have the tools they need to shut down violent gangs?
We have a lot of tools, but there's so many that are missing from the toolbox. And we can look at what's been effective in other states, other jurisdictions, and get an idea of what might be helpful here. As you said, one of the tools I've been looking at for a long time is the state RICO law. RICO stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations. A lot of folks may be familiar with it from its inception back in the early 70s. Back in the 60s, mobsters were getting away with crimes because the soldiers actually carrying out the criminal activity were layers away from the actual shot caller. And so in the 60s, a law school professor from Notre Dame, John Blakey, developed a concept in law that criminalizes an organization. And so it was a way to reach these mobsters where if someone participated in the organization, they would be in violation of this newly enacted RICO statute. And so what that was effective in doing was going after organizations where foot soldiers did the dirty work, but the captains and the dons remained insulated from prosecution until RICO. And it was so effective at taking out organizations at the federal level that states followed suit and passed their own state RICO laws.
Really?
Tennessee,
How many states have RICO laws?
the last I counted was 33 or so.
Wow. And so what you're saying then, like if a guy pulled the trigger and shot somebody, that the person who gave them gave them the gun, the person who drove them to the place, I'm just thinking out loud, the person who actually ordered this, would all be brought in under the RICO statute. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and actually goes beyond that. There are laws that criminalize getaway drivers, people who supply the gun. That's all involved in, we'll say, the instant offense, the actual shooting that occurs. What RICO does, it allows us to get back to the organization itself, because it was so hard to find witnesses to testify that this person who pulled the trigger got an order from this lieutenant who hung out with this captain, was acting at the direction of the Don. And so what RICO does, it just looks at the criminal organization. And so the shooter in a particular case, as well as the getaway driver, could be prosecuted for the actual act that we're talking about. But if the Don could be shown to have participated significantly in the criminal organization itself, then just that is a RICO violation. And so it goes back even further than what was described earlier, but it allows the Dons to be touched.
This sounds like a great tool for law enforcement, and because they really can't do that sort of stuff now. It sounds like it's probably a bit of work putting together a case, but now my understanding is that Tennessee passed its own RICO statute. I don't know how many years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago. But they found some holes in it. Now you have been working, haven't you, on that very problem, hasn't you?
Yes. In my opinion, the Tennessee RICO statute is the weakest in the nation. It has numerous hurdles that federal RICO does not put before prosecutors. It has what an experienced prosecutor, I think, would agree that has an almost impossible requirement for RICO conspiracy cases, which in Tennessee requires a meeting of all the minds that are charged, which, it's almost impossible to get 10 people to agree who the greatest quarterback of all time is, much less to get 10 people to be found to have the same opinion or the same meeting of the minds when conducting a particular criminal activity. So it's a very high burden, a lot of hurdles that Tennessee prosecutors currently have to deal with that federal prosecutors of RICO cases in other states, especially Florida, do not have to deal with. And one of the things that I think we need to do, besides strengthening our law in some places, is eliminating some of these unduly burdensome requirements for prosecutors.
Wow. Now, when Tennessee had an active RICO law, or has the federal RICO law ever been used against gangs in Tennessee?
Federal RICO law, yes. As a matter of fact, it's still getting used federally. As I understand it, in Nashville, they indicted federally under RICO a lot of MS-13 members. So it is still a very applicable tool against street gangs. The difference in a federal case and a state case is that the feds usually take lots of time, require lots of investigation. The breadth of the number of cases they can take is much less than the state prosecutor's office. And the state prosecutor's office basically has to prosecute everything. The federal prosecutors can choose what they prosecute, so necessarily it's going to be fewer cases. So it's kind of like the feds have this atom bomb, and on the state level, ours is very weak. And with the tweaks that I would love to see the legislature pass, it would allow the state of Tennessee to have not necessarily as broad of a case as the feds can make, but definitely one that's leaner and meaner and can go directly to the heart of gang leadership. And that's what I think Tennessee needs. That is an incredible tool that, if used correctly and with the right people that understand how to build a RICO case on the front end, we can make major strides in getting some of these gang leaders off the streets.
I think this is wonderful because, with the recent polling, with just the talk in the street, just talking to people with what the news headlines are, I mean, people are really concerned about this, but it's as if it's avoided in certain circles because they really don't have a way to go after it. And, it's very difficult. And so now you and I have chatted a couple of times before about this, have actually been up to the state legislature and testified or whatever, or given testimony or whatever you call it, to the state legislature about this. What is it that, tell me how many times you've been up there, and what kind of stuff are you telling them?
Okay. Back in 2012, we took the very weak RICO statute in Tennessee and expanded it from the two types of crimes, which are child pornographers and big time drug dealers, to include gang members for the first time. So in 2013, RICO could be used to prosecute gang members. And I went up to testify about that, let them know that it had been used successfully in other states. However, prosecutors were still hamstrung with the burdensome requirements I talked about. So even though the testimony and the legislative efforts of 2012 were able to get us on the board, we're still on the board with the weakest RICO statute in the nation. More recently, I was asked by Chairman Bo Watson to look at the RICO statute again to see what we could do to strengthen it. And so what I've been going up to testify about recently are radical improvements in our RICO statute that allows us to streamline its use to street gangs while expanding the net against verified, validated gang members to get them under, as you said earlier, the crosshairs of RICO. And so that's what's going on right now, Doug.
Now, you told me, I think, that Florida has the best state RICO law. And so one of the things you've done is look at Florida's law, and then you've looked at the federal law, and you've taken the best out of them and put them together. And so what you're presenting, what is being presented up there, and maybe in a minute you could tell us who's carrying this bill for you or for us. It's not just you, it's for all of the citizens. Maybe you could tell us what the current status of it is.
Absolutely. The two people carrying it are very powerful, well-known, highly respected members of the Tennessee legislature. On the Senate side, you got Chairman Bo Watson, who has long been interested in keeping the streets safe, making sure prosecutors and law enforcement have the right tools. And this is one he recognizes would take us several steps forward against gang violence. On the House side, you have the leader of the House, William Lamberth. And William Lamberth was a prosecutor for 8 years. So he understands this language when I explain to him what a predicate act is and how statute of limitations work versus the time frame for these predicate acts. He's very well versed in the prosecutor's mindset, and he sees clearly how this can also move Tennessee forward. So those are the two legislative giants that are behind this particular legislation. Now, one of the things, were you gonna ask the question?
No, go ahead.
One of the aspects of what gets discussed today legislatively deals with overreach. Is this something that's too powerful? We don't want to sweep up the high school football team for committing these acts, say vandalizing the rival football team's high school stadium. How do we limit RICO to make sure that everyone feels comfortable that it will be used exactly for what's intended for, which are violent street gangs? And so some of the amendments that the chairman and the leader and some other folks up there have been playing with the RICO have been tweaking it to ensure that. And I can get into detail with them if you want, but I can tell you generally, Doug, if the amendments we've proposed pass and it goes through the Senate, Tennessee will have a high-powered rifle, very targeted just towards street gangs, to point at some of these leaders and to let the ones who have so far enjoyed these layers of foot soldiers between the crimes, to actually get them in the crosshairs, to get them into court, to establish the presence of a criminal enterprise, which will be the definition of a gang, and have them and their past activities put on trial to show that they supported this criminal enterprise. And if so, then they will be on the block for heavy penalties. These are what's called B felonies, and they start at range 2. It takes a lot to put them together, but if we do, these gang leaders could be looking at 12 to 20 years in the penitentiary. And that's a huge step forward, considering we have nothing comparable to it right now on the state side.
Now, that wouldn't include, like in the case of a murder or a kidnapping, the person actually did it. Would they get a larger penalty and be charged with something in addition to RICO?
Yes, there's two types of charges generally we're talking about. One is called a predicate act, which would be a crime that's committed that furthers the gang's motives and their goals as well. And then there's the actual RICO violation as well. So to use an example, say of a murder, say there was a gang leader who wanted another gangster taken out. And so he would give the order for that person to, for the trigger man to go shoot a rival gang member. And so the two things that the gang leader could be charged with is the actual, one of the first of which is the actual shooting of that person, which would be a predicate act. But the other one, if that case falls apart, because as we've described and everyone knows, it's hard to get that testimony that connects the gang leader to the actual shooter. If the gang leader's past actions, his past crimes, his own robberies, his own thefts, his own assaults have been shown to be in furtherance of the gang's activity, then he can be prosecuted for RICO as well. Even though he can't be connected to the predicate act that one person is connected to, he could be connected to other predicate acts 3, 4, 5 years ago, perhaps. And if those predicate acts were shown to be in furtherance of the gang, that's when he gets hit with a RICO charge.
Wow. I think this is great. I think this is just what we need in Hamilton County. And I think it's probably what they need in all the major cities in Tennessee.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah. So let me ask you another question. Do law enforcement officials in Tennessee support this move?
Everyone I've talked to does. I can tell you this, that the most recent amendments, as far as the most recent bill that was submitted this year to update RICO, has the official support of the Tennessee District Attorneys Conference, the police chiefs across the state of Tennessee, and the Sheriff's Association. So law enforcement recognizes the utility of this bill.
That's all the law enforcement in the state.
That's all the ones I'm aware of.
That's great. I'm so excited about this. So Bo Watson from Hamilton County is carrying this in the Senate, and William Lambert is carrying this in the House. Where's he from?
I think he's from Knoxville. I know he's a prosecutor in Knoxville.
Are there any people from Hamilton County that are in the congressional committee that's overlooking this thing?
You talking about in the federal Congress?
No, locally. I mean, in the state, are there any people from Hamilton County that are on any of these committees that people would call or something like that?
I believe Senator Todd Gardenhire is on the Senate Judiciary Committee. And so he's a local person that's on it.
Right.
I've already talked to him about it. He's very clear on it as well. So,
Oh, good.
yeah.
Good. Well, this is really exciting. We've talked about what RICO is. We talked about its potential impact, improving Hamilton County. I hope people have really got the gist of this. This isn't a long, exhaustive interview, but I really wanted to, I mean, you're right involved in it. You're not talking about this from a distance. You've both prosecuted and defended and been the gang task force person. And so, I mean, you really understand this, the reality out there of putting a dent in this whole thing. If viewers want to contact somebody or to ask more questions about this, well, let me ask two questions. Who should viewers contact if they say, hey, this is a good idea? Who should they contact?
Any viewer in the state of Tennessee should contact their local legislator in the Senate and the House and let them know that all the law enforcement officials, their agencies in Tennessee agree that this is a fantastic tool. So they should contact that legislator and let them know that if you care about gang violence, you care about this bill passing. They can also contact, if they have questions specifically about RICO, they can certainly contact me. My email is boydmpatterson@gmail.com. I'll be happy to answer any questions about it. And I can say this too, one thing that your viewers can add when they contact the legislators, if this isn't guesswork, we're not hoping that this will make a dent in crime. The state of Florida and the federal system have had gang RICO actions for decades. We have case law that shows exactly how they're mapped out, exactly how they need to be proved. The feds have a RICO manual, which is a great resource on how to shore up a case and how to get it off the ground. And so this isn't anything that you have to cross your fingers and hope will be effective. We're simply adding to Tennessee a tool that's proven to be effective against gangs as a whole in multiple states, but especially Florida and the federal side as well.
That's wonderful. I do need to ask you one more question as we're sitting here.
Yep.
I have friends who, when I mentioned this to them, they said, oh, you have to be careful of RICO. It may be turned around and used against people who really weren't doing anything wrong, but they ended up getting caught up in a RICO law. I have one friend who's a pro-lifer, and he ended up getting a judgment of over $1 million against him and for this, and he hadn't broken any laws or anything, but it was in another state. And he just said, no, this is not a good idea. But from what you're telling me, it wouldn't really go after people like that unless they were somehow involved in a criminal activity, would it?
Correct. And there are two safeguards for that. One is that it takes a long time to build a RICO case. So no one's going to waste a lot of time to go after the high school football team or a pro-life protester or someone that really is a decent member of society but just disagrees politically on an issue. And so there's no way a prosecutor, like I've heard that hiking the Appalachian Trail takes 2, 3, 4 months. It takes about that long to build a solid RICO case. No one's going to hike the Appalachian Trail just to go get some vagrants, or high school kids. So that's one safeguard. But there's another one, Doug, that if this particular bill passes, will be one that's not present in any other state except ours. And that's the definition of enterprise. Enterprise in the in the federal RICO and the Florida RICO is pretty broad, and and necessarily so, because there are lots of types of criminal enterprises, from Medicare fraud to embezzlers to the mafia to street gangs. What we have done in Tennessee is narrow the definition of enterprise to cover the basic definition of street gangs, which again we've taken from the Florida RICO statute, which has been shown to be effective. And so you can picture our RICO statute being narrowed down to just gangs, but the power that these gangs can be hit with still includes every aspect of the larger RICO statutes, which again come from identifying the criminal enterprise as a street gang, letting the jury hear all about how the street gang has terrorized a particular neighborhood and all of its members. That way the jurors have a full picture of exactly how much damage a particular street gang has been causing a neighborhood, and the right thing happens in court. So I'm very excited about this particular RICO bill, hopefully passing in session this year.
Well, I want to encourage all our viewers and everybody who hears about this message to get on the phone and call your state legislator, your state senators, and you know who they are. You should. And if you don't know, you can go to the Hamilton County Election Commission, put your name in, and they'll tell you who your state senators and state legislator is, and call them up. Say, hey, this is a great idea. We've got a problem in Chattanooga, in Hamilton County, and this would really put it'd be like rolling a bowling ball down a bowling alley and knocking over the pins. You get a strike. So it's a great idea. It's got all the restraints that are needed. It's a good idea, and it's more than a good idea. It's a great idea, and I'm so glad, Boyd, that you're involved in it. And again, give us your email in case somebody wants to contact you with a specific question.
I think it's Boyd M. Patterson at gmail.com.
Boyd M. Patterson at gmail.com.
Yes,
All
M
right.
is in Michelle.
Yeah, okay. Boyd, thank you for your time. Great interview.
Yes.
Best to you and your efforts to protect all the citizens of Tennessee, especially the bigger cities with gang problems. So
Thank you, Doug.
thank you, Boyd, very much. All right.
All right. Have a good day.